Welcome Rose Marcus, an evolutionary astrologer, a weekly columnist, teacher, lecturer, and author of the book Insights into Evolutionary Astrology. Rose will introduce the rest of the panel and tell you about today's topics.
Why, thank you, Robin, and I am delighted to be here, and it is so wonderful to be able to share with the tribe. So I want to thank Sue Hilliard and Robin for facilitating all of this today. And we have on our panel today Deva Green, daughter of Jeffrey Wolf Green. Hello, Deva.
Hi, thanks for welcoming me to this discussion today. I'm really looking forward to it.
Awesome. And Chad Harris. Hello, Chad.
Hi. It's good to see you, everyone.
Oh, good. And Bradley Naragon. How are you, Bradley?
Hi, good to be here. Thank you.
Okay. And Ryan Evans.
Hi there. It's a pleasure to be here, y'all.
Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. And thank you to those who are joining us live and for those who are listening later. So, we are on day 2 of our astrological overview for 2022. And it's going to be quite a year. It is jam-packed full of, huge, major transits. And I'm going to share my screen, I hope, here. Let me just, before I do that, it looks like I have to make an adjustment here. Sorry, bear with me one moment. Okay. Where are we here? Okay. So just in terms of a little outline of what we're going to do today and what we've already done, we have some really major transits coming up this year. And we are finishing off the year. This is December 21, 2021. And we have just started with Venus retrograde. So Venus retrograde in Capricorn ends on January 29. The transiting nodal axis will do a sign change starting in January. The true nodes as of January 18, the south node moves into Scorpio and the north node moves into Taurus. That is an 18-month transit, and the eclipses take place along the nodal axis. And in the year ahead, we will have Saturn square the nodes. We've got some really important activity with the planetary nodes, the nodal axis, I meant to say. February 22nd is the first of the Pluto return for the USA. We have a triple pass this year, July 11 and December 28, when Pluto will return to the same position of the USA natal chart. On March 6th, just before March 6th, we will have a conjunction of Venus, Mars, and Pluto in the sign of Capricorn before Venus and to a conjunction in Aquarius at 0 degrees. And that's a sensitive point as we are just around the corner from Pluto's entrance into Aquarius in 2023, first introduction. April 12, we have the great conjunction of Neptune and Jupiter in Pisces. Jupiter moves into Pisces as of December 28 and moves into Aries, December 28 of 2021, moves into Aries May 10, and will continue in Aries to October 27, revisiting Pisces to the end of the year, October 27 to December 20th. October 30th, Mars in Gemini stations retrograde to January 12th, and that will be a very important transit as well, too. So we're starting the year with Venus retrograde and ending it with Mars retrograde. And I've just put on here on the slide here, November 8, we have a total lunar eclipse at 16 degrees Taurus Scorpio, which is the date of the US midterm elections. So that's just a little quick rundown. On this next screen, you can see the Mercury retrograde dates. All of the Mercury retrograde cycles start in air and they back into Capricorn, back into Earth. So that's quite interesting in terms of modalities. As I mentioned already, the nodal axis, South Node in Scorpio, North Node in Taurus. The dates of the eclipses, we have 2 total lunar eclipses. The one on May 15 is square Saturn, so it's pretty important. And the outer planet retrograde cycles, which every year the outer planets do go retrograde. So those are all the listings on the date. So I'm just doing a quick overview for you. Today's topics, what we're speaking about today, Jupiter's conjunction with Neptune, which is April 12, 2022. Saturn square Uranus, which we had through 2021, and we're going to revisit that later on in the year. And of course, that Mars retrograde. And we have a lot of activation with Aries, Chiron, Jupiter, Mars, and we have Eris and Aries, an outer planet. So that's the big rundown for today, just for anybody who needs that kind of fill in. And I'm going to start with a little talk about Neptune and Jupiter conjunction, which you can see on the screen, April 12, 2022. And the time frame here, I've drawn up a 0 Aries chart. I like to look at things in the natural wheel just because they're easy visual to see. On April 12, Jupiter will be at 23 Pisces, Jupiter and Neptune will be at 23 degrees Pisces. Now, this is very interesting. And first of all, any planet that is in its natural sign is very potent. So Neptune is a 14-year transit through a sign. It is a 164-year transit around the sun. And so we only get Neptune in Pisces once in a lifetime. And Jupiter is a 1-year transit through a sign. And every 13 years, Jupiter and Neptune meet again for a conjunction. But it has been 166 years since Jupiter and Neptune were conjunct in the sign of Pisces. And you can see on the screen, March 17, 1856 was the last time that these planets were together. 13 Pisces, and now the next conjunction will be May 10, 2188. So, we've got a long time in between those. So Neptune is, quite important in terms of our concepts regarding evolutionary astrology. Neptune is the source of all things. And I like to refer to it as the ultimate source. It is the sum total, the totality of being, of consciousness, representing the divine, and so forth. So it is, it is everything and all. And Pisces represents the ocean of consciousness, right? So Pisces archetype here, within the Pisces archetype, it's the fish swim in 2 directions, right? So we have with Neptune and Pisces the archetype of relinquishing, surrendering, transcendence. We have the search for our ultimates, a search for ultimate purpose, value, and meaning, ultimate ideals, our ultimate path, of service, our ultimate vocations, our ultimate other, our ultimate others that we look for in terms of, those special people in our lives when, the ultimate other is always the divine, right? So lots to wrap into that sign archetype. Pisces is also Neptune and Pisces. It's also the archetype of potential, of hidden wealth. And so contained within that archetype, is really buried treasure. It is when I see Neptune being activated, I think it's stirring up hidden potential. So there's a wealth for us to draw from right now with this transit. Now, Jupiter coming around to the sign, coming and meeting up with Neptune, is doing two things. It is culminating something. The transit is culminating, and it is beginning a new cycle. Jupiter is the expansion planet. It is the search for truth. It is all about our belief systems, right? It's all about that. And I think right now, again, Neptune is the planet of collective attunement. And when we have Neptune and Jupiter together, we're all in it together. We are all attuned to something. Whenever these two planets come together, the whole world is tuning into something. The whole world is focusing in on something. We're all picking up on that energy. And so this is something that what we're recognizing right now with our human experiences is that there's no degree of separation here. That what is taking place on the planet is something that is relevant for all of us, right? So again, this idea of search for the ultimate. I think right at the moment we're all searching for ultimate salvation. We're all looking for hope. Again, Pisces is the archetype of disillusionment. And when we have Jupiter is a planet of expansion. It increases whatever it touches. So with Neptune and Pisces together, we have, this increased desire to regain faith, to regain trust, to regain hope, and we have an awful lot of disillusionment on the planet. We have an awful lot of loss taking place. Whenever we have Neptune and Pisces together, we have this mass consciousness, but we also have mass, whatever events take place are mass. Where I live, we've had some real devastation quite recently with the atmospheric rivers that have wiped out the farmlands locally, and people have lost, their livelihoods. They've lost their homes. They've lost everything, and the tornadoes that have taken place in the United States as well too. Devastation on a mass scale. Whenever you see Neptune and Pisces together, you're going to have mass exodus. A lot of people are going to be leaving the planet, together. When things occur, they're large, they're big, right? We've got all of those kinds of statements all kind of wrapped up, in all of this together. Pisces, it's a water sign, right? And of course, as Jupiter and Pisces come together, this is, a high watermark year is what I'll say. And, Neptune and Pisces, they're kind of soft. It's about a whole kind of trend that's being set and so on. I mean, we're going to see, continuation of major events that are global, that are affecting us globally. Neptune and Pisces rule the immune system, right? And we've got Jupiter expanding that. This is perhaps a high mark year for the pandemic. Neptune is the archetype of exposure. It's the archetype of the immune system, or vulnerabilities and so forth. We've got, we're all being exposed, right? And so forth. So a high watermark year, perhaps, in so many different ways. When we're talking about the oceans, recently in the news, there's been the doomsday glacier in the Arctic, right? That I just saw an article today that was saying that perhaps within the next 5 years, that thing's going to break. And if it does, the sea levels are going to rise significantly. Right. the heating up of the Earth is speeding up the ocean's currents as well too. The water, in its variety of states, and we'll talk about this a little later with the Aries archetype here, but the melting of the permafrost and how that's releasing methane fuel that is, methane gases that are, all the toxins are being released, right? And so forth. So, we have Neptune and Jupiter. It's everything and all, I think, in terms of what we are facing. Pisces is the archetype of idealism and so forth, and all of our ideals and what we are, how we have ascribed to those ideals, and what ideals now are sustainable and what our ideals are not. I'm Canadian. Here in Canada, we have huge tragic, cut your heart to shreds, thing on the residential school trauma, where massive unmarked graves and so forth. And right now, the Indigenous people are seeking of truth and reconciliation, right? Which is a perfect statement for that Neptune Jupiter. This is the Catholic schools, and asking the Pope, to apologize and to come to Canada and to stand and grieve with the Indigenous people. That's a huge story. The scripts that are being written right now, they're big, they're huge, right? These are so amazing. In terms of, Pisces rules religions, it rules spirituality, right? It rules the iconic. And, Jupiter Neptune is a signature for iconic passages of time, iconic people doing iconic things. There's Neptune and Jupiter as well too, the new frontiers, space. We have space exploration going on right now in a way that we have never seen before. It's very interesting with this Venus retrograde right now through the end of January. On December 24th, a telescope's being launched into the atmosphere. I've forgotten the name of it. I've got it written down here someplace, but it is unfolding while it's traveling over the next 29 days. And that just strikes me as, kind of symbolic of what's taking place throughout the whole year. As an unfolding, when Neptune is activated in the way it's activated, it is about the collective attunement. And what I really think about that influence is, what are your beliefs, what are your philosophies, and so on. And I think that that we have an ability, to direct by setting of intention and setting of will, and about projecting, the reality that we want to see, and that reality that we want to see. Neptune and Pisces, it's about humanity finding its compassion again, right? Which is happening right now through the nature of great happening, the volunteers that are coming to help the farmers clean up the fields, and the people in Kentucky to supply them with essentials and so forth. We see so much. I will ask for input here from my colleagues. So, sorry, may I just go one more step here? And sorry, I'll ask for input now. Go ahead, Chad, Bradley.
Just one thing I noticed when you were talking about this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, that chart has the Sun conjunct Aries, and it just kind of made me think about Aries has had so many activations in the last couple years, and it seems with the Pluto square and And so it's interesting to see Aries show up in this chart too. So more disruption and chaos, apparently.
Yeah, more disruption and chaos for sure, for sure. Chad, you had something you wanted to?
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Rose. And I was really tuning into the hidden potential that you mentioned about the Jupiter-Neptune alignment and the collective attunement. I think both of those things are going to be very ripe, and the sense of, I guess, just backing up a little bit to contextualize where we are in this moment. We've just been through 3 years of a really intense Saturn-Pluto conjunction that, you know, the pandemic and the totalitarian kind of concentration of power that we've seen around the world, both, you know, in the United States as well, with Trump's orientation towards totalitarian autocracy. And, you know, the pressure and the intensity of that constrictive forces that have been closing in on us for the past several years is now ending. The Saturn-Pluto conjunction is ending this month. It's moving out of the 15-degree orb alignment. And the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction, that I should back up just a little bit and just say that I'm coming from this from the archetypal perspective, which uses wider orbs from Richard Tarnas's work in Cosmos and Psyche. And the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction moves into a 10-degree alignment in February. And I think we'll begin to feel that Jupiter-Neptune optimism and orientation towards spiritual elevation earlier than in April. I think it seems as though we very much are ready for this type of numinous attunement out of the realpolitik situation we've been in for so long. And I do believe this will correspond to a good bit of uplifting, optimistic energy and orientation towards higher pursuits. But I guess, yeah, maybe I'll just leave it there for now. Did you have anything?
I have to say that I was on a panel yesterday, and I watched a presentation last week, and the kind of the flavor of a lot of the information that astrologers are putting out is really quite dire, and I think we haven't done enough talking about about the inspirational and the uplifting part of that. And I certainly think that we're ready to grab anything that will give us that kind of lift. We certainly need it. We certainly need some some comfort in that area. Ryan, you had something to say?
Yeah, hi. Thanks for taking my call. I'm Pisces, being a dual sign, I'm both really optimistic and really pessimistic about this energy. On the one hand, I can see how collectively we've all been mired down in the hell and the challenge of what this pandemic, et cetera, has represented. So it's understandable that there is a corresponding individual and collective desire to find some sort of salvation. Please, Lord Jesus, or whoever, come and save me. And that kind of energy is really, really good, but we have to be very careful that we don't slip into the illusory part of it. Oh, I've been in such suffering. I know virtual reality is going to save me. Instead of the hell of, trying to work from home, hey, I can just put on my goggles and enter this brand new world where everything's fine. Forget about the other world. So I want to be really careful that we don't slip into some sort of illusory kind of salvation, especially especially if it is something that is maybe handed to us by someone whom we have projected authority upon. So, rather than making any kind of predictions, let's just say on the one hand, let's be careful of the illusion. But on the other hand, I like to think of Pisces as obviously as the season right before the last frost. When, we enter Aries and Taurus season, we want to get into the ground and start working. But in Pisces, the symbology is more like poring over the seed catalogs and imagining what the garden is going to look like. So I want to be careful about the illusions, but I also want to celebrate that we're in this realm of imagining potential right now. I don't know that we're necessarily actualizing potential right now, but being able to pour enough relatively detached imagination into the realm of potential, I think there is a lot of really delicious, wonderful things that can come out of this. Maybe if we all meditate just a little bit more every day, maybe if we help our neighbor take out the garbage just a little bit more every month, those little things that help add to the collective heart, I think are going to be so much more powerful than something big and magical. The spaceship's gonna land. It's not a hologram, but the spaceship's gonna land and Jesus and Elvis will walk out. I mean, I want to be careful of that. So I guess long story short, I think that if we can maintain a balance between, projecting a lot of really good intention into this energy, but at the same time having enough healthy detachment and enough, waiting to see how things develop, kind of a not my will, but thy will, O Lord, kind of feeling. I think that we could make the best use of this energy.
Absolutely. And, Jupiter ruling planet of Pisces, Pisces is the archetype of convince and convert. And when you have those two together, you have the master illusionist, right? Again, it's a statement for the advertising end of things, and we all want to believe that greatness, right? Whatever that might be. So there is a danger there in buying the illusion. That's absolutely for certain. The transing nodes have moved from Scorpio into Taurus, and that north node in Taurus is a resource. That's our resource, and of course the activity of Venus, its ruling planet, wherever that is going. And Taurus is about being grounded, and Ryan, as you were saying, take some time with it, right? And I really think that that Taurus North Node relative to the activity of Venus over the course of the year, hooking up with Pluto 3 times at the beginning of the year, just twice in 2021, and they're March 3rd, and then coming back at the end of the year, Venus Pluto on December 28 to finish off 2022 as well too. I think that it all comes down to we have all that collective attunement, but if you wanted to serve the universe at the highest and greatest that you could possibly do, it would mean to come back to center and to resource from within, and to live your life to the best that you can. If you can make your contribution to your personal and private world in terms of living with good morality and so forth, all of that, your ability to contribute to the well-being of the whole is significant. That's all that, as I always say, if I'm feeling good and I go to the grocery store and I smile at the cashier who's having a rough day, it helps her. you know, and then, you know, if I say something kind to some stranger or so on, you know, it's like the, you know, tossing the pebble into the water, you know, like all of that's effective. Deva?
Right. To add to that, or from my perspective as well, that can fuel into really feeling on a collective level, really feeling the difference between putting that into a root or consolidation, seeing the North Node in Taurus. It's what's the saying that necessity is the mother of invention. And the more that we nurture that, or the more that we really ground into our personal resources and tune into the ingenuity of Mars and Aquarius, how can we then use this not just for seeing South Node in Scorpio for my own personal benefit or for personal gain, rather to tune into the true inspiration that can come from that from that Jupiter Neptune. It's like it can potentially create a very big collective vibration of us tuning into each other, giving each other the hope to keep planting, to keep nurturing, to keep putting soil, or to keep nurturing that seed for the good of all around us, so that we can really shift from that perspective of what do they call it, the us for and no more, into, well, I think we're in a place now relative to the heartache and the trauma that's been breaking many of us open into more receptivity. And what can we do for the collective we? Or what can we do outside of that in terms of the North Node in Taurus? And as you are all saying, to really hunker in, or to really make this self-effort to do that, and then all kind of tuning into the potential inspiration that can come from that Jupiter Neptune.
Wonderful. Absolutely. And, you know, this is April 12, and whether there is some event that takes place, you know, around that date, I think that this is an ongoing signature, this transit. So I think that we will see throughout the year the triggering of this Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. I was just going to make one other statement, you know, the things that we don't see. And, you know, while we've had the pandemic dominating our attention, you know, well, here in my province anyway, across the country, you know, Neptune and Jupiter is also a signature for the opioid crises that we have going, and that's really not gotten as much attention. And I think, Ryan, you were talking about that earlier. It's escapism, you know, that we have as well too. Yes, Ryan.
Yeah, and on that note, thanks for that, because back in 1856, the last time of this conjunction, we had the Second Opium War between China and Western powers that made opium trade legal. So I think it's just kind of synchronistic that you brought up the opioid crisis. Lastly, just really quickly, I love comparative literature. Madame Bovary by Flaubert came out in 1856. It was a story of a farm girl who was in the convent who got married, and it was wonderful, and then had affairs, and everything was great and beautiful. And then the illusion finally caught up with her, and she died of self-administered arsenic poisoning. So I want to throw that out to us, who are anyone who might be looking for any form of escapism at this time. Oh, it's been so much hell, I need to escape. That it seems to me more about compassionate acceptance of where we are and how to move forward here, as opposed to escaping from any kind of hell we may find ourselves in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I felt like those were really good points, Ryan, that you brought up about escapism, and we will have, like you mentioned, the metaverse potentially coming online soon, and the potential for escapism is clearly there. And, you know, I think on some level, we should probably address the mass delusion that's already underway in our country, where we have 70 million people who falsely believe the election was stolen from them. And, it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the hearings that the Senate, the January 6th committee will have potentially in late January or through February and March, and to see what type of effect they have on either busting bubbles of illusion, which I don't necessarily think will happen in mass, but bringing further clarity to what actually did happen on January 6th will be helpful to move forward. And I think just on that line with politics and the mass delusion that's taking place, it is interesting that when Mars turns retrograde in, I think just before the election or right around the election, it's squared to Jupiter and to Neptune. And Neptune is opposing natal Neptune from the United States chart. And Mars is conjoining natal Mars. So it's a Mars return squared Neptune and opposite natal Neptune. And, or I might be mixing that up a little bit, but it's clearly a Mars Neptune configuration. And it is interesting that we already have, people theorizing on insurrection for 2024. And the Mars Neptune has a, direct correlation with violent fantasy and imagining violence. So it'll be really interesting to see what actually happens at the midterm elections and the eclipse that's there, and the Mars Neptune Jupiter signature, and how we embody that alignment relative to the outcome of the election.
Yeah, that's Mars turns retrograde about 25 degrees of Gemini. So it's going to be triggering this Neptune Jupiter conjunction for the fall, really, for encompassing the entirety of the election process, right? The campaigning and so forth, right? So, and just a note as well too, that Jupiter and Saturn are a planetary pair. And in 2021, they started a new cycle, a new 240 cycle in the element of air, a new trigon in the element of air. And so that Saturn-Jupiter is just getting underway right now in terms of, and Aquarius is a signature for social politics, is it not? Right, so we've got a lot to look forward to in this year. Note on the Neptune-Jupiter conjunction as well too, that Saturn is pretty tight square to the nodal axis. Right, Mars has just surpassed that. There's Juno up there, and Vesta as well too. So we've got we've got some turning points in the year ahead. Have we talked enough about the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction? Does anybody have any closing thoughts?
I had one more thing to add, if that's okay.
Yes.
When Deva was talking, it kind of sparked a thought about that North Node in Taurus in this chart, ruled by the Venus in Pisces. And obviously we're going to go into a period of time where that North Node in Taurus will punctuate how we're surviving right now. And as we're seeing a greater acceleration of crises from various sources across the globe. On a positive note, that ruling being in Pisces, and then that rule by the Jupiter Neptune in Pisces, I would say that we have a great potential creativity and imagination. And as we know, I was just reading again in one of the Pluto books where Jeff's talking about, through crisis, humanity will evolve. And that whole idea of we have all this potential, we have all these ideas, but it's not till it really comes down to it where we're forced to be like, okay, and not just some of us, but on a collective level. So, but just to put that out there, that there's just so much brilliant creative potential and ideas that are happening. Last night, I finished watching Fantastic Fungi. I don't know if any of you have seen that. It's a very inspiring movie. And mycelium is definitely a very Piscean Neptune thing, and it is connecting everything. And also it brings a lot of hope for a lot of the environmental issues and a lot of the trauma and other issues that humans face right now. And I do see that mushrooms and mycelium could also be obviously correlate to this chart and signature, and is something that does symbolize a hope and creative solutions.
And you can see that in this chart, that south node in Scorpio is trine that Jupiter Neptune, right? You know, so I think that that speaks exactly to what you just said, Bradley. And, you know, that's a wonderful thing as well, too. You know, there's so much hidden wealth there, right? So much. All right, shall we move on? I will stop the screen share. What was our next topic here? Saturn square Neptune, right? Yeah, and were you going to, who was talking about that, Ryan?
Oh, I can talk about that if you'd like. In fact, I jam on what Bradley was saying. I actually just made a little text in the little text box on the mycelial revolution, Uranus and Taurus. And if anything, maybe this is just a couple one-liner entry into this discussion, but I think that if this aspect shows us anything, is the need to have an agriculture, or we're in it, but an agricultural revolution where the right now, the way the whole food system is centralized and controlled is, if we really were to pick it apart, it's quite outrageous. So my hope of what comes out of this time is an increased awareness for the necessity of localized, organic, permaculturally based food systems and distributions. In fact, if I were to get Jupiter and Neptune right now, I could imagine everybody growing just a little more broccoli in their garden and sharing that with their neighbors. Boy, that would really not only solve a lot of problems ecologically, economically, but also spiritually, from 7,000 years of trying to control and dominate nature. So I feel that is starting to turn back to co-creation with nature. Let us pray.
You know, about 10 or 20 years ago, I think I did this lecture where I said, you know, I'm really nervous because I'm not a good gardener, and next spring I'm going to grow a garden. And people just laughed at me. And, you know, the next year when I did the talk, they were going, well, how did your garden grow, Rose? And I go, oh, gosh. Yeah. You know, that's what we see here in my neck of the woods, you know, a lot of urban gardens, you know, which I think are totally brilliant. These, you know, kind of empty areas that people have taken, and some of them are quite beautiful, right? You know, yeah, I totally agree. That's Taurus, right? North Node and Taurus, right? Absolutely. Yeah. So Saturn square Uranus. That was a topic that someone wanted to discuss. In 2021, we had Saturn and Uranus dominating the year. And on the 23rd, 2 days from now, is the final of the 3 squares for 2021. And the planets will not perfect a square in 2022, but they'll be awfully close in October of next year. So, you know, what I said about this transit was, you know, Saturn 2.5 years through the sign of Aquarius. I said, you know, that jackhammer is taking an awful long time to bust up the concrete of the past. And Taurus, Uranus and Taurus, you know, the future is taking far too long to deliver its goods. And in between, in the middle, we've got thick soup, I think. I don't know, we've got a hodgepodge. So Saturn, our planet that corresponds to reality, and certainly we've got a lot going on with Venus in Capricorn, and this alignment March 1st to the 3rd of Venus, Mars, and Pluto in Capricorn, getting us kind of started for the rest of the year. But Pluto in Capricorn, swinging its wrecking ball on any structure, system, consciousness, or reality that has outworn its time has come. And boy, are we ready to move forward. Chad, do you have something to talk about that transit?
Sure. I guess again, I should probably back up and just my frame of reference is wider orbs, and it's the pandemic was clearly a Saturn-Pluto event, but that Saturn-Pluto conjunction, it began in 2018 and it's ending now, and it was exact in January of 2020. But what actually happened was Uranus, well, I guess Saturn, as it crossed the conjunction with Pluto, it began to square Uranus in January of 2020. And I take that as the beginning of the pandemic and the break from the past constructed reality that we had. It was the beginning of the unexpected, tumultuous turmoil that has continued till now and will continue through 2022. And that from that sense, I recognize the Saturn square Uranus alignment occurring from January of 2020 through into 2023. It comes back to within 1 degree. I mean, we can say it doesn't perfect, but it's almost
close enough.
Yeah, I mean, it's within a degree. Like, that's exact in my mind. Like, the fact that it doesn't actually make the seconds exactitude is kind of irrelevant in my opinion. And that Saturn square Uranus is clearly a big part of what we're negotiating as far as the progressive movement versus the conservative movement. This is the dialectic that is governing most of the year. And just look at what just happened with Manchin saying no to the progressive agenda right as the Saturn-Pluto alignment, the Saturn-Uranus alignment does come into exactitude. But it's everything from like the infrastructure situations that we have, like the Texas power grid that collapsed in the winter last year. It's just anecdotal, but the building that collapsed in Miami is a Saturn-Uranus event. And it's those types of things archetypally that like the structures of our systems are being destabilized, and that energy will most likely continue through 2022. And the civil strife the Civil War in 1861 began during a Saturn square Uranus period, and we can clearly see that social division ripe in our moment. And then I think I don't want to focus all on negative. There's really positive ways in which we do need to have radical reconfigurations of our values and the structures. And if the bill gets passed, you could see positive infrastructure build would also be part of the Saturn square Uranus alignment. So yeah, I see it as like a broad sweep of time that this is taking place in. And yeah, there's a lot to it in that sense.
And when you have those planets in dynamic shape, additional to what I just said as well, too, it's an acceleration, right? So there's an acceleration of all of that kind of reinvention, radical reinvention. And it's a continuous process while those transits are there. So we're not at the you know, we don't have anything, you know, kind of locked in, right? You know, it's all shape shifting continuously. It's, you know, it's all doing that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then I'll put this out there. There is a movie being made, or it's been made. It's called Changing of the Gods. It's a 10-part series now, documentary kind of series that's focusing on the Uranus-Pluto chapter of Cosmos and Psyche, but it's going to be released on February 22nd, 2022. And, you know, no one can foresee how much of an impact it will or won't have. But if it does begin to create a discussion that unfolds widely in some way in culture, then it will be a real positive manifestation of the Jupiter-Neptune alignment, and a kind of a re-sacralization, in a sense, of a recognition of the sacred dimension of reality. And we'll see, you know, it also could be very destabilizing for a lot of people that will push back against people taking astrology seriously in any wide scale, you know, phenomena. So who knows? That's all speculative for sure, but it's definitely an exciting thing in the back of my mind that may or may not have a widespread effect that we may be discussing or may not be discussing as the year unfolds. But I mean, I don't know if you guys probably didn't see the talk we gave last month, but I really focused on Iain McGilchrist's work, which is on hemisphere lateralization. And I'm not going to go into details. This is crazy to do that now, but what you mentioned, Ryan, that like the 7,000 years that like we have basically have an incorrect perspective. I mean, that's kind of not a great way to say it, but basically the reason we focus on the material aspects of life is because the left hemisphere is overly dominant in our cognition. And it is why we have objectified the world and objectified each other, why we created racism, and ultimately why we're taking the planet apart, why we're taking the biosphere apart, because we're seeing it as parts rather than a whole. The right hemisphere sees the whole picture. The left hemisphere is designed to grasp and to attack prey or to manipulate the world. The left hemisphere is designed to be aware of the world in its wholeness, to be aware of any predator that's coming. But what's happening is we're overly focused on the left hemisphere, and the materialistic worldview that it's rendering it's suicidal. We're destroying the biosphere. And the astrological perspective is a holistic perspective. It can help us move towards recognizing the value of the unitive dimension rather than the part. And astrology as a phenomenon can take us out of the nihilistic, mechanistic worldview that we live in and change that nature so that we recognize the actual value and the sacred dimension of all of life. I know that sounds a little Jupiter-Neptune optimistic, but
nicely put.
I do think that there's a lot of building momentum from other corners in philosophy and in physics that are moving towards a recognition of a unitive nature. And yeah, I won't explain it all, but it's coming out of quantum physics, and there's a recognition of entanglement as being the fundamental nature of reality rather than an abstract kind of thing that happens sometimes. It's that everything is entangled. The electron fields, the Higgs boson field, everything is entangled, and the astrological dimension renders that a true reality, that we are entangled with as far out into the cosmos that we can recognize. There is a meaningful relationship to that. And that shift, this is what I'm trying to say ultimately, is that shift is what's necessary because we're overly focused on the part. And we're destroying the holistic. We're destroying the biosphere because we see it as parts rather than a whole. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah,
tangity and abstract.
That's great. Ryan?
Thanks, Chad. That was awesome. And I concur. Moreover, I'm going to take a risk here, big risk, and bring in the words God and goddess, divine feminine, divine masculine. Yeah, our left brain has, we've needed to survive, we've needed to control, and we've needed to dominate this world. And we've, like you said, our survival instincts, we've needed to protect ourselves from prey. We don't need to do that so much anymore. Right. We are, and this is what I could imagine being a beautiful manifestation of Jupiter, Neptune, Pisces, where we do see, left brain, right brain. Well, what happens if we spin them together? My intention and reality. What happens if we apply quantum physics and spin them together? Oh, the great God and the great goddess. Well, what happens if we spin them together? And so, again, my hope, to use that Jupiter, Neptune, Pisces word, is that there is an increase in awareness of these things that we're talking about, that yes, there is imagination and there's also reality. There's reality, and let's look at the quantum field. We have these ancient belief system of divinity being a controlling God. And what about the resurrection of the messy, chaotic, unpredictable, beautiful, sacred feminine in there? And so, again, my hope is that we have a reintegration of these energies of, as you were saying, left and right brain, divine masculine, divine feminine, a reintegration of all that comes out of this.
Yeah.
So,
excellent.
2 cents.
I just love that concept of quantum entanglement. It's just like, wow, science really discovered something, didn't they?
Yeah. Genuinely. Yeah. And from what I understand, it really is moving towards the recognition that entanglement is fundamental. Like, I read a paper about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, that was the thesis of the paper, was that any new theory will have to incorporate entanglement as a fundamental aspect of it, rather than just this like spooky action at a distance, as it had been recognized for the past 80 years.
Cool. Very cool. Added thoughts? Deva?
To kind of switch gears for a little bit, just from my personal lens, I can also see those transits, the South Node in Scorpio, North Node in Taurus, and the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction. I think it was with the Saturn-Uranus square, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
As what we're experiencing collectively as a minority rule versus a democratic or majority rule, and a progressive shift in how we respond or how we're structured relative to the impact of progressive authoritarian psychology or dominance or what have you. From my perspective, I see more and more people who in response to that, are tuning more into personal resources that they have, whether it's, for lack of a better term, not being quiet. With Mars in Aquarius in the 11th, there can be rebellion that really at the heart of it speaks to this regeneration of being fundamentally a part of the whole rather than being suppressed by a small group of people, or being suppressed by a minority role. And so from my personal lens, I can see those transits as triggering that in terms of how we're personally relating to ourselves and others relative to that greater whole, if that makes sense, and pushing us to more deeply think about what we already have, not something going back to that theme of being saved or the illusion, or gee, maybe it'll be something coming from the sky. But that it's something that we really have to grab for it during these times, is my personal view. We really have to, South Node in Scorpio, motivate ourselves to pull out, or to motivate ourselves to see what we already have, to help nurture what can come from a positive level, because thinking that it can come from the outside or relying on those who have power. I mean, my personal opinion is that even people with power are limited relative to, of course, natural boundaries, Saturn, but also the nature of the collective times. I guess in my own way, I'm seeing more and more that we can't rely on those external forces, or we can't rely on factors that are external to ourselves, because we're really being catalyzed more in a Taurus realm to manifest or to think about potentialities that we all have from within, if that makes sense. That's kind of my personal lens in terms of how we're reacquainting, or how we're almost readjusting to our inner relationship with ourselves and the whole and to others.
You know, one way or another, we're headed towards our future, right? And so we've got to look at what kind of resources we have that are going to take us there, you know? So, you know, we have to work with what we have, right? Absolutely.
Yeah, Dave, I really resonate with that a lot. You know, I think we literally are in the midst of a radical transformation of the world and of ourselves. And it's interesting, like McGilchrist, I haven't read the new book yet, but he's saying that like, it's not just about adopting the perspective and recognizing like, oh, left and right hemisphere do different things, and then just taking it and moving on. And like, we have to change. And that's what you're saying, like individual resources, and so much like of astrology in the past, it was, you know, before the Copernican revolution, it was fated, you know, like we were at the mercy of much larger forces than ourselves, and ourselves, the individual I, autonomous I, didn't exist in the same way that it does now after the Copernican revolution and the modern differentiation of individuality. We didn't have the same participatory capacity, in essence, or at least conceptually, we didn't have that. And now we do. We're moving into a humanistic, psychological, participatory engagement with the archetypes. And that is, it has to come from us. Like, it's not about, oh, the planets are gonna make us change. They provide an opportunity, a window of archetypal participation that we can act and we can enact to their highest or their less life-enhancing potentials. And that's up to us. Like, how are we actually engaging with the alignments, with the archetypes? How are we consciously participating with them is where the rubber meets the road, and where the new possibilities will be creatively enacted, not just experienced. Yeah. So I really resonate with that a lot. I think that's part of the transformation that's happening, is a movement towards embodying and participating consciously, rather than more of a, I mean, you're always surfing with the energies, but grabbing them and creatively enacting them with the imagination and the will. I think that's the vector that we need to be oriented towards and moving towards, that will be most productive, most fruitful for us.
Yeah, and I think as we move through that process, another resource that we have to recognize is time. That it takes time to create the necessary evolution, the desired evolution, and that evolution is a work in progress, right? And that we have some time now to do that, and that time is precious. That every moment is precious, and we recognize that when we lose, when things are taken away from us, when we lose our loved ones, when we lose our lands and our livelihoods, and right, So we're in a really momentous period of time, and we need to know how to use that. So I think part of the the angst about the future and what to do about it, and how to be creative and work with it and to make the change. Well, it's a matter of synchronizing with the energies, right? And first of all, it is to have inner will for that change to take place, and then to be alert to the synchronicities that are delivering whatever kinds of messages they are that say, how about this? Do this, try this, a change could happen here that could actually be wonderful. Why not? Come along, be open, right? Be receptive. It's about that North Node in Taurus, about tuning in, right? Tuning in and resourcing. And it's another thing about the Pisces archetype and Neptune and Pisces and so on. One thing that we don't do is allow ourselves, sanctuary, quiet, peace, give yourself a moment of silence, those that don't meditate or something, allow for some of that to happen, because, it's in those moments of stillness when the greatest downloads happen, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yes.
Or it also can happen in that sudden, shocking Uranian trauma, which says, all right, time to change. So that is one of these possibilities. I know that Uranus and Taurus, it's jamming on, I guess, what everybody else has been saying. It's like our value system and what's really important to us. Taurus is now up for revision. Uranus. So how can we avoid any of the traumatic experiences while doing what we can to make the appropriate change in and of ourselves right now? And so, not to get too predictive, but if Taurus is Earth and Uranus is change, one could possibly put them together with the words Earth changes. And if there were some changes in our biosphere, that could instigate us to make some changes really, really, really quickly. So, so being as optimistic as possible, how can we make those changes, going off what Deva was saying, in and of ourselves in our immediate sphere as soon as humanly possible, so as to, I don't know, mitigate some of the potential trauma? So just throwing that out there.
Well, isn't that the beauty of astrology, and why we study it and why we practice it and why we offer our services out as well too? Because astrology, kind of identifies all of this. And if we can have a context through which we can dialogue with whoever might come seeking for that kind of information. It's good to get on track. I'm a fire sign. I got, I'm Aquarius rising and so on. It's like I see these Uranus transits and I see Aries and so on. I go, yippee, like something to do, some place to go, like I'm always looking at those changes. I look at Uranus and I don't think trauma. I go, change, yippee. And so, yeah. And I guess that brings us into talking about some Aries transits that we have. Bradley, you were going to perhaps talk about that. We have Jupiter moving very fast through the sign of Pisces this year. Like, wow, it only spends about 8 months in the sign of Pisces. Middle of May to middle of October, we've got Jupiter moving into Aries, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I added it up, and if you add because it goes back into Aries at the end of the year on December 20th, it's actually it's almost 6 months of the year in Aries. It's kind of wild because of, it's like last year it was in Pisces, but it wasn't in as long because of, now this year it's in Aries longer, and then anyway, that whole thing. I did put together a couple slides. Is it okay to do a
yes,
quick
absolutely.
Okay.
Do I allow screen sharing, or does somebody else allow?
Let me see if I can.
He should be able to just share it.
Share? Okay, good.
Here
there
I
you
go.
go. Cool.
Okay. All right. Yeah, Aries activation. And so one of the things, I got to move my panel here. One of the things that came into my mind was this concept of ever new joy, Jupiter in Aries, because Yogananda actually does have Jupiter in Aries. And so yeah, here's Yogananda's chart in the middle, Jupiter in Aries and Mars in Aries. And I thought, this is really interesting. On June 15th of this year, you can see Jupiter's conjunct Yogananda's Mars, and the Mars Chiron is conjunct Yogananda's Jupiter. And I just always remember that Yogananda spoke of this, ever new joy. And I always thought of how it fits the signature in his chart. So seeing these transits, I thought was really interesting. And for those that connect with Yogananda, I would imagine that June 15th would be a time where we could really connect pretty profoundly with his spirit. So I thought I'd share that. We kind of have talked on this, and this is kind of just like to throw out there. This is when I get down and depressed or something about the world and think about the negative, and I remember that there's also the positive, and it's always the full spectrum of, the horrible, the great. I mean, there's like how many billions of people on the planet. So when we think about, all this Aries activation and energy, it's like, well, yeah, there's probably going to be some more violence, an increase of that, sure. But there's going to be a lot more to it. There's the full spectrum, of course. So just to kind of throw that out there. And of course, the evolved Aries includes Libra, and that, if we all have equality in our freedoms, we want our freedoms, sure. What does that mean? Do we all equally have access to that? And obviously, I think there's going to be a lot of increased motivation coming up here. And I'm going to get into the charts a little bit. And just wanted to say, which we all know, that if we tune into this flow of, whatever that means for us in each moment of time, that there is this increase of power, not in an egocentric individual level, but by being attuned with the larger integrated, connected reality, which goes back to all this Pisces energy, right? And thinking about Jupiter and Aries, I kind of was like, well, what came before, and I do want to say that obviously we all remember in 2020, we had half the year with Mars and Aries. And I do think that there's definitely, I kind of think of it as these holographic connections, which I love about astrology, is there's certain links in time. And that was just brought up with that last conjunction of Jupiter and Neptune and opium, and how that's connected to now and the opioid crisis. And so in the same way, even just the events of Mars and Aries in the second half of 2020 I feel like a lot of that fire is going to get re-stirred up. And that's, like I said, it's a full spectrum. It's of what that even means. I wanted to touch just for a second on the Pluto and Virgo generation and the pandemic. I had a couple thoughts on this. This is somewhat related to topic in the sense that one of the things that I thought about the Pluto Virgo generation is obviously their polarity point is Pisces. And so one of the ways that Pluto and Virgo generation has a lot more meaning in their life is to be connected with something much greater than who they are as an individual, to be plugged into some kind of cause, right? And so when I've been thinking a lot about the psychology of a lot of the human dynamics socially that have been playing out with the pandemic, I've noticed a lot of extremes and everything in between, full spectrum, of course. And, some people have, I think a lot of the Pluto Virgo generation has actually had a total crisis and burnout and kind of been fried. I think some of them have kind of gone into hyper Pluto Virgo vigilance. And a lot of people feel like by being extremely careful and promoting vaccination and all of these safety protocols, they're part of a larger cause of protecting life that is sacred and caring. And at the same time, I've noticed that the Pluto and Virgos who are really angry about infringements on personal freedom, and they connect with feeling like they're part of a cause too. And so for an example, like one of the issues that's pretty complicated obviously is, are we going to fire people from their jobs if they're not vaccinated? And I think and even in that generation to join the cause of saying, no, we're not going to do that, from their point of view, I think there's a compassion there of like, what are we doing now? We're taking people out of their livelihoods and jobs. How far are we going to go with this? And so I just wanted to throw that out there, is that there's this whole, because the Pluto and Virgos are kind of like the lead generation right now. I mean, yeah, the Pluto Leos, are they still the lead? And so the Pluto Virgo is kind of at the helm and in power. A lot of these dynamics are swirling around, and a lot of it ties to the Pluto Virgo psychology. And that has set a lot of it's painted the landscape of some of the response to the Mars energy. And of course, if a Pluto Virgo is angry, there's of course then this whole like the projection and the blame, scapegoat, who is responsible for this, and so we've had this whole. I was in Home Depot and I saw this on a truck, and it's like, I'm like, wow, like it's actually cool to just be a total asshole these days, like and to not care, to give no fucks whatsoever, and like it's a movement. So that's a thing, and I've kind of been thinking about that a lot, especially with all the Aries energy. And then just on a second note of this, I gave a Neptune and Capricorn talk once, and obviously if a majority of the population is in a consensus evolutionary state, while I think a lot of the people that are in my close life are this, Neptune, Uranus and Capricorn, a lot of trauma with patriarchy and rigidity of social structures. The reality is that we have a whole generation coming up where a lot of these people Neptune and capitalism, Capricorn, idealize nationalism within their consciousness. And we're seeing this play out now as this kind of like, and someone talked to about it, of, you know, who's gonna, is the minority or the majority gonna sway the direction for humanity? And people look around the globe and be like, well, in that country, you know, other people are standing up for this too, and they're doing this. So yeah, this is okay that we're doing this too. So there's a bit of that, you know, and yeah, the Neptune opposition was brought up. And I'm really curious about this Neptune opposition for the US. And I guess just in the question of even like, is there going to be a great disillusionment, even more than there already has been? Or has it just been this progressive multiple disillusionments that have been going on? And you know, that's like a huge whole thing that we could get into that. I'm not going to go further, but I just wanted to throw that out there, that, you know, in this whole thing, that is a factor. And in this, I had one day where I live in a town where I usually see like Blue Lives Matter bumper stickers on the majority of vehicles. And I was like, wow, so the USA as a country has this natal Neptune in Virgo. And I realized that if you think about that from a consensus standpoint of view, it just simply symbolizes this idealization of service to the country. And if that's going on in people's consciousness, the whole like Blue Lives Matter thing, I think is like, it's a reaction because there's this like, what, you know, like I was looking at somebody who's in law enforcement on their social media feed, and, you know, they're like posting people who have died in service, and, you know, they're like saying, say their name. And I think like for a certain population, there's this like anger around not taking seriously the, you know, like disrespecting the service. Like these people are like risking their lives. They're caring about their communities. They're putting themselves out there, and you're not taking them with, you know, like honor or respect. And there's a lot to that issue, but for some reason, thinking about that symbol, it gave me like, you know, like how astrology just gives us something to be like, oh, okay, actually for this whole country, there's this idealization of this service. So I'll just kind of put that in there and keep that in mind when I see that around me. And of course, there's been a level of collective frustration with the last Mars and Aries. And you know, back to the whole full spectrum idea, I'm not just saying people who are frustrated about masks or vaccines. It's all over there's a lot of different reasons people have been frustrated. And so when we get into this Aries thing, I was like, people may want to let loose a little bit, you know, or blow off steam, or even, I mean, I've talked to people who barely come out of their house in the last 2 years. And so is it going to be like, I'm going to have the courage to just actually do something again? And so I you know, in some hand, it could be a very big energy release for people, you know, ready to just like, let's do it again. Let's, you know, let's do something. And, you know, some people might be obviously re-inspired to pick up the fight, whatever that means for them. And, you know, we could see like carelessness and recklessness, of course, full spectrum, yes. And the last time Jupiter entered Aries, you know, it popped in June 2010, and then, you know, it did its permanent entry in January 22nd, 2011. And then, of course, we all remember when Uranus entered Aries. So Jupiter's last entry into Aries was really punctuated by this Uranus entry into Aries. Seems like only yesterday we were talking about that, right? And there was a lot that happened as soon as, you know, Jupiter went into Aries. There was the Egyptian revolution that started, in the Arab Spring, this whole larger movement of the people. And, you know, the fact that when Jupiter is going to be in Aries in 2023, Uranus is going to enter into Pluto. And so there's this whole connection between Aquarius, Uranus, this Aries energy, this mobilization. So we're going to see, and of course, the massive we had quite a few earthquakes that year, and the big one that led to the Fukushima and the nuclear crises. That was just a chart for that 9.0 earthquake there. And in the US, where I live here, you know, we almost had a government shutdown in April. And so again, it's just like this long-standing friction. And that's kind of question of, I was driving into work the other day and I saw a truck and it had a US flag sticker, which they're everywhere. It's very popular now. And it also it was advertising that their business was teaching people how to shoot guns. And I was like, wow, okay. And some, you know, if you ask some people, you know, like the whole, like, are we heading into a civil war? And some people will be like, we're already in it. So, you know, all these things led up to this. Also, I was talking to somebody the other day and they said, you know, 2020 was really just like a lost year for a lot of people. And so if we think about that with all this Aries energy coming up, you know, people are ready to do something again. You know, it's like lost year, lost 2 years. I don't know where people are at or what their experience of their lives was, but obviously this will inspire a lot of like, okay. And there's also kind of this, you know, it's 2021 and, you know, when will this end? So like if people are waiting for some time to carry on or begin or do something, you know, like this is like, I've kind of been like, this is the 2020s, you know, it's going to be a messy, chaotic decade. You just got to get used to this, find your own grounding. North Node is going to be in Taurus. And then, you know, as I mentioned earlier, the positive side, obviously we're in the Virgo sub-age, transition of the ages, this escalation of collective crises. This could be exactly the only thing that's going to bring real change, as challenging as it is to be in crises and to know that we're facing more. And so there's those Jupiter and Aries dates, May 10th through October 26th or 27th, and then it pops back in at the end of the year. So that's a lot of Jupiter and Aries this year. So fast through Pisces. And yeah, like I said, I was like, oh wow, Jupiter's gonna be in Aries where when Pluto pops into Aquarius, which kind of ties back to that whole Jupiter entered Aries and then Uranus entered Aries. So there's this kind of the movements that happened in 2011 and this prequel to Pluto and Aquarius era. And then, you know, Mars is pretty brief in there. And Jupiter is going to conjunct the Aries point 3 times. So that's pretty significant for sure of what's coming into the world. And I think at this point in time, we know a lot of people use astrology and are going to time things coming into the world at these times to see it as a very opportunistic time. This is the May 10th ingress chart, but I just did it for my locale. So I don't know what people do for the houses, but there's Venus and Chiron in Aries too at that time, that Mars Neptune conjunction. The Mars Aries ingress chart's pretty wild. The moon's right there, Jupiter's right there, Venus is conjunct Eris, shows up again. Wow. So, you know, while there's that Mars Chiron conjunction on the 15th of June, which is basically that chart I showed earlier with Yogananda's chart connection. So yeah, obviously there's the tuning into spirit and some, you know, I think people can really tap into a new sense of where they source joy. And it's going to be all the things, of course. this is, what is this chart? Oh, that's Mars conjunct Aries, June 27th. And, you know, Jupiter, Mars, and Aries, more heat. You know, if you look at the spring equinox chart, honestly, I think we could have a pretty wet spring, but then the summer solstice chart, whew, is like, I don't know. I mean, I've dabbled in astrometeorology a little bit, but it kind of seems like we might have a wet spring and a really hot summer again. So we'll see, but yowzers. And that ends my slides there. And yeah.
You know, I'd really love to see some really good, positive narcissism, you know, like the hell with, you know, all that stuff going on out there. I'm going to do this for me. That might be healthy, positive narcissism would be really good, don't you think? We're going to take a 5-minute break. So we shall be back. All right. Wonderful. Well, we've covered a lot of ground so far. And I think we have so much to talk about. I'm trying to share my screen here. I was going to put this chart up just for a moment. Can you see my screen here?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is the USA chart for the time of 2:13 a.m., which most evolutionary astrologers use based on the fact that it was the preferred chart that Jeffrey Wolf Green liked to use. And what I have, the bi-wheel, is the total lunar eclipse on November 8th. Sorry, I'm just trying to get things out of the way here because I can't see all that much. But we have two total eclipses, two total solar eclipse, two total lunar eclipses of the year. And, you know, eclipses are going to be event generating and they are accelerating, and they are important if they make direct contact with your chart. Certainly they're important if they're going to make, you know, direct contact to any chart here. And we have the USA birthday. So on this eclipse, 16 degrees Taurus, there's the moon there. Uranus is retrograde at 16 degrees Taurus as well, too. It's a 12th house archetype with a sun in the 6th house. And that 16 degrees is squaring the USA moon and the Saturn position. So it is the total lunar eclipse is re-stimulating that Uranus-Saturn square, and pretty dynamic on the chart. Where is the, sorry, I'm just trying to find, oh yeah, and the Neptune-Jupiter transit that we were talking about, that conjunction takes place in the 11th house of this chart. I know that there are a batch of different times for the USA. So that is an interesting thing to think about, the 11th house. And the 11th house, of course, you know, is a signature for the social zeitgeist and what's going on, you know, the breakdown of existing reality, and again, the collective trauma piece coming out of that statement there, and the search for, again, leadership, and search for leadership is a Jupiter archetype, looking for someone or something to lead us, you know, for our salvation piece. And also to note that we are in this chart, Mars is at retrograde, the natal Mars of the US at 20 degrees Gemini. So the Mars transit, that's going to be a very long transit because of the retrograde, is going to cross over the ascendant and be a first house influence for the USA. And, you know, I'm not American, so, you know, a lot of the talk is around US politics and so on. And Bradley, you said something a little while ago during your talk, but I think that every country has disillusionment with their leaders. I certainly know that with Justin Trudeau in Canada, although the world tends to see him as being, somebody great. We here have our own complaints. And so we've got this chart, but I think that because the USA is a world superpower and a leader, a superpower nation is really befitting to see Pluto in the 9th house of the chart, right? A world leader, a super nation, and so forth. So that's why I favor this chart. But I also think of this chart, as the leader of the country rules the people. And it references the people. And I think as a horary chart as well, too, the fact that the USA is a lead nation, that what takes place in the USA is, of course, important for the world, right? So I think that we can adopt this chart is what I was going to say about it. So lots of action going on. The Saturn on the moon. This has been earlier in the year because Saturn is back and forth, and so there's tremendous pressure on the government or on governments. If we're looking at it as a horary for the world, right? That there's tremendous. Tremendous pressure on governments to be accountable and to be responsible to the people, right? And certainly it keeps the political landscapes in chaos, Aquarius, right? And so forth. And of course, notice that the transiting node positions, 13 degrees, Taurus, Scorpio, are exactly square the midheaven of the chart, the midheaven and the IC of the chart. So this is very dynamic. I will pass it over or open the floor up. Who would like to input here? Go right ahead. No takers.
Well, Rose, thank you for that. And yeah, I've been doing a lot more of watching news around the world and seeing this kind of paralleled phenomena all over the planet in all these different cultures. And so there's seeing that, and I think you're right in the sense of the if something happens to the U.S. economy that's drastic, then I was reading an article that's going on in Turkey and inflation, and it's just like all over the world like this. We're in a global economy now, and it's all connected, and this country affects that economy pretty significantly. So yeah, it definitely makes sense in that regard to see that. And I think a lot of us have been thinking about this, at least I have, is how much pride there's been, historically in this country, of like this great nation, yada yada, and this kind of fall from stature with the Pluto return, and seeing across the globe, people kind of putting us in our place a little bit, which I appreciate, kind of the fall from grace and greatness.
I think of that Jupiter, Neptune, the American dream and the American nightmare, so they say that, like that's got that kind of piece about that. But, Ray Grassi wrote a really terrific article on the Pluto return, and he was talking about England and so forth. That was on Astro Dienst. It's a really good, it was a few years ago. And it was running through England's few Pluto returns, right? And whenever Pluto returns, especially in the sign of Capricorn, borders, boundaries change and empires rise and fall, right? So, and I think the shift of moving from the Capricorn reality, which we are with, we haven't really talked about the planetary nodes, Pluto moving over the planetary node a few years ago and all that kind of switch pattern that I personally saw in terms of climate change isn't real. Oh, wait a minute, climate change is real. When Pluto went over the nodes there and so forth. And I just think that, kind of the reordering of existing world reality here. I'm not, I know that Russia and China are, taking over the world, but Aquarius rules, the group, right? So maybe instead of having one superpower, we have a batch of superpowers, and that would be the ideal, would it not? That we are equals in terms of instead of having the hierarchies. Chad?
Yeah, thanks. That's really good. I feel like the Pluto return is very much a significator or a sign of our negotiation with our power, both personally, as far as our actual responsibilities to each other and the pandemic and that type of thing, but also collectively with the power of the United States and its relationship to China in particular. It is interesting that the Saturn-Pluto conjunctions throughout history have corresponded to world wars and world power shifts, and particularly the conjunction was World War I and the whole reshifting of world power dynamics that began then. And then at the end of World War II, which was the founding of the CIA and the Cold War and the wall and Israel and Pakistan. And then in the 80s, there was another conjunction, and that was really the end of the Cold War. I mean, it was the peak of it, but Gorbachev comes to power in 83 and the end of the Cold War happens. And now we're in the next alignment. And there's clearly a shift in the world power dynamics moving from the United States and the West to China and the East, it seems. Yes, of course, it would be, it would be preferable if there was more of a balanced sharing of power rather than an accumulation and a diminishment here, because we're clearly working with exactly that. Like, how, are we going to strive to compete with China in a military fashion? Is that going to continue to ramp up? And, how are we going to negotiate the, I guess it's been described as a decoupling, at least potentially, from China's perspective, in that they're making a solipsistic internet. Like they're going to have their own internet and, in a sense, have their own worldview cultivated within their reality. So, how are those power dynamics, Saturn and Pluto, gonna work out? I think it was interesting actually that the Peng Shuai event where she's the Chinese tennis player who just accused the vice president of sexual assault, and the Women's Tennis Association, they pulled their funding for, like, it's $100 million project in China for the Women's Tennis Association. And now, are we going to be beholden to China's power and just relinquish? And are they going to, go back and work with them? This started at the beginning of the Saturn-Pluto conjunction, actually, when with the Hong Kong situation and the NBA there was a situation where the manager for the Houston Rockets tweeted "Stand with Hong Kong," and the Chinese government said, "No, we don't want that, and you have to retract it." And there was this whole, are we going to kowtow to their wishes and be beholden to their plutonic power? Are we going to stand in our own power and our own sense of moral concerns and, fiercely defend them? And this is a really interesting dynamic that's emerging between our two nations in the world. It's like how much oppression and of civil rights and human rights are we going to stand for and still negotiate this relationship with China? So this is getting back to that Pluto return and our power, and are we going to stand in that power, or are we going to relinquish it in certain ways? So yeah, so much of that is up for the United States. And yeah, with the Mars return, the Neptune opposite Neptune, you know, how are we seeing it clearly? Are we, you know, imagining it correctly? Are we delusional in our perception of ourselves and of others? So yeah, a lot's up.
Yeah, it's all up for grabs, right? Yeah, it really is. Yeah, here's the Neptune right here opposing that Jupiter Neptune. Yeah, Ryan.
Jamming on what Chad was saying. There is only one Lord of the Rings, and he does not share power. So as the South Node transits through Scorpio, processes, I guess, through Scorpio, make no mistake, that's not the South Node moving through Taurus. The South Node is very much a pervasive feeling of the energy that is up. Scorpio is not a light, comfortable, easygoing kind of energy. I'm loath to coat anything that occurs over the next year and a half with any sort of anything other than deep, hardcore transformation that puts us face to face with our shadow. And so if that is a possibility, how do we navigate this with as much Taurian energy to counterbalance that as possible? And I believe that's our work as conscious individuals, our work as astrologers, to say, hey, yes, this is a reality. There are hardcore Scorpio truths that must be brought to the surface. And so how can we do our best, North Node and Taurus, to maintain our balance and our equilibrium, our connection with nature, our connection with the true root value systems of goodness and peace, and again, working with the cycles and the rhythms of nature as the ways out and the answers to all of these complexities that Bradley described and Chad has recently described. I don't want to say, oh, it's going to be okay, just as much as I don't want to say, oh, prepare for invasion. You know, it's anything is possible. So keeping that awareness, I think, is going to be really, really important over the next year and a half of regardless of how scorpionic things can get, how can we be as Taurian as humanly possible and not succumb to the darkness of potential Scorpio energy as potentially seen in this lunar eclipse chart, but to remember that the real revolution is in our ability to maintain our stability and focus and solidity, practicality, our solid values of love and compassion amidst whatever goes down. So
yeah, and Scorpio is about confronting the choices, and the Taurus piece is about staying consistent with that which you value and which has, you know, the deeper purpose and meaning. So, you know, Scorpio is a simultaneous process. So, you know, as we get confronted with those choice makings, so what I always say is that if you've already acclimatized and you're already very well anchored or very well rooted in that value system, you know, that instinctually you make the right choices at the right time, right? You know, and we would just hope that when presented with the opportunity, that the right choices are made, that are encompassing and that are directed towards renewal and life rather than death, right?
Yes, yeah, I agree completely.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing to add to the global stage of all this, I noticed in my research that at the last time Jupiter went into Aries, that's when, and I'm not sure how to say his name, Kim Jong-un, North Korea leader, came into power at the last entry in. So I thought that was just noteworthy to add to the bigger dynamic, because there's this lot of like, are people just like flexing, you know, or are you planning something? And if there's actually an intent to take action, it seems like when the Mars-Jupiter action starts, that would be a time that North Korea would do more than just like shoot off their practice missiles or whatever. But anyway.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. Jupiter and the Sun are in opposition at the end of September. I forgot what date it is, like the September 26th, Aries Libra, right? As you know, that's the transit of any planet in relationship to the Sun, right? You know, so Jupiter and the Sun will be in opposition at that time, Aries Libra. And at the same time, we've got, we're just Mars about to turn retrograde as well too, right? You know, so the Mars transit, actually, I'm just looking here, it's just about the end of September when it'll cross over the ascendant of this chart and activate whatever it is that we haven't seen yet. I think that really is a statement for, I think that the fall will be totally subsumed with the elections in the U.S. and whatever the politics of the day are. And I do expect that the Mars retrograde in relationship to that Jupiter Neptune, probably we've got a little bit longer to go with the pandemic too.
Yeah, it's interesting that, you know, you bring up North Korea, Ryan, but or I'm sorry, Bradley, but it's the major confrontation that's broiling potentially is Russia and Ukraine. Vladimir Putin has like 175,000 troops stationed on the border for Ukraine, and it is I don't know. I guess it's kind of a coin toss as to whether or not he decides to invade. The United States and the intelligence they really don't know. You know, he does a lot of saber rattling, a lot of bluster in the past, but he's also never amassed this amount of troops on the border before. And you know, we've already said we're not going to try and stop him. NATO is not going to get involved. So he's either going to take the Donbass region of Ukraine or not. And, you know, it will be interesting to see just as Mars crosses Pluto and crosses Saturn in spring, whether or not he decides to take action. It's interesting when he started to build up the troops, it was like Mars. He had his personal transits. I think it was Mars on his Jupiter Pluto. So he was feeling that robustness to put his sword out there. But we'll see. It's you know, how that, if what happens there will be really interesting. What happens with the hearings or not will be really interesting this spring. But the eclipse on Uranus, I mean, but all the both of the eclipses really. I mean, the one on March 30th or April 30th is also widely conjunct Uranus. And I have hopes for the Changing of the Gods film and the potential Uranian breakthrough that it could insinuate or instigate. So that would be a really optimistic manifestation if there was a widespread astrological discussion surrounding its validity in culture. That would be a really interesting Uranus North Node eclipse North Node manifestation. So again, speculation, but possibility. So.
Has anybody else got anything that they would like to cover that they haven't talked about yet?
I mean, they covered the, I think I didn't actually watch it, I would skim through it, but I think they covered the Mars-Venus alignment somewhat, but it is a very interesting, a very long-lasting Mars-Venus conjunction that we will be experiencing through a large portion of the spring. And it bodes well for a lot of creative dynamism and, you know, social interaction. We'll see what happens with, you know, I mean, personally, my hunch is that it's not as lethal, and which we seem to be getting that information that it's not as lethal. And if that continues to be the case, there shouldn't be more lockdowns. You know, there shouldn't be more vaccine mandates. There should be a lessening of those things. Whether or not that happens and who wants to utilize it for control or not is a different story. But we'll see. Again, it's up in the air. We don't know. But if there is a loosening of restrictions on some level, the Mars-Venus conjunction with Pluto and you know, speaks highly of social dynamic interactions. So it could be a very vivacious, vital spring in a lot of creative, dynamic ways, and really positive ways. So we'll see. I mean, we didn't cover the Venus retrograde they did yesterday, but
you're welcome to talk about it again. Everybody's, you know, everybody has a different point of view, and it all comes together to, you know, to give us a picture of the story. So have at it.
All right. Well, it was interesting. Right as Venus came into the conjunction 3 degrees or so before, the Pope came out and said, sins of the flesh are not as serious as other sins, which is a really interesting statement coming from the Pope relative to Venus-Pluto concerns. I kind of anticipated that we would see some secret affairs come to light, that type of thing, but I didn't expect the Pope to come out and say, hey.
Mind you, the Pope still hasn't come out and apologized to the indigenous people yet, so he's reserved that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We're still waiting.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing. I just heard there was a situation similar, I think, with African Americans in Tampa, the Tampa area, that they've just uncovered mass graves, and like the Tropicana Field is it's like there's African American graves underneath, and yeah, a lot of that unearthing and, you know, revaluing or re-looking at the depths of our values and our Plutonic transgressions in the past and stuff like that is all up for the Venus-Pluto as well. So, which is a very long alignment. I mean, it's exact now, but it comes back after the retrograde period to conjoin Pluto again with Mars. So it's a long process that we're in. So it'll be interesting to see how it continues to manifest.
Ryan, go ahead.
Yeah, you know, I was in high school in the 80s, and boy, there's some awesome music that came out of that time. However, It was about junior year where I'm like, I'm done with popular music of today and I'm going to be listening to music of the 60s. So Pink Floyd, Grateful Dead, Bob Dylan. Wow, just such magic and beautiful art that came out of that time. But the Renaissance in art that came out of the 60s wasn't because there was peace and joy in the land. There was war going on, and there was injustice and civil rights and women's rights. I mean, there were wars on many fronts. And out of that came this amazing art. So I would like to think that we have been in such a place of relative suppression culturally that whatever goes down, that the Renaissance in art that comes out of this time comes out of having been in lockdown or having been in quarantine or having been in COVID fear, and this creativity circling, whirlpooling within us, that whatever goes down this year could very well elicit the release of that energy. So I'm hopeful for new forms of art. I would love for it to come out of where we've been as opposed to anything that may yet occur. So I just wanted to throw that out there for comparison, that, you know, the music of the 60s, if you will, you know, came out of the social and political turmoil of the day. And so if we are headed for such an astrologically observant cultural renaissance, that it come out of whatever we're feeling inside, as opposed to something out there instigating it. So.
Well, Jupiter Pisces, you know, music and movies, right? You know, and I just think that, you know, that whole industry is really, really quite amazing. I mean, there's some really incredible stories being told. And of course, there's a lot from, the internet now. You know, there's a whole different forum for doing that. And, you know, the Gaia network and, you know, all those different things. So yeah, I agree with you, Ryan. I think let's have an explosion of creativity. That would be lovely.
Yeah, the Mars Venus Pluto alignment, clearly creative and dynamic and powerful. Sure. And
well, certainly that's the avatar stuff that you see on TV.
Yeah, actually, I was just about to mention that. I remember clearly when the previous Jupiter Neptune alignment happened, and I forget exactly when it was, but I remember going to see the original Avatar movie, and which was Jupiter Neptune, and you know, it's such a Jupiter Neptune movie in the sense of the enchanted dimension of, you know, the embodied, embedded relationship with a numinous reality, with a reality that is sacred, that is commensurate, that there's a communion between all the life forms on the planet. I forget the name, but there's going to be, the sequel is going to come out in the end of December of 2022. And the Jupiter Neptune conjunction, it doesn't end until early 2023. Jupiter comes back into Pisces, 29 Pisces, and stations within about 6 degrees of Neptune at 23 or 24. And that Jupiter Neptune conjunction will still be very, very operative. It's interesting also that one of my personal favorite albums, and from 1971 was, or maybe 70, but The American Beauty by the Grateful Dead, which was recorded during the Jupiter Neptune conjunction of that era, and is very much a symbol of the sublime connection to the divine in that album in particular. So yeah, I'm hopeful in optimistic ways for a lot of creative, numinous Jupiter, Neptune, Mars, Venus, Pluto energy. And, you know, I remember also that when Avatar first came out, that it had such an effect on the culture that people were actually getting depressed after watching the movie, because they were going back to their dull, dreary lives in a sense that, and they were missing the enchanted dimension that they literally was experiencing. I mean, I read an article about it, you know, it wasn't just me saying that. But I think, I mean, personally, might as well say it, you know, the left hemisphere has objectified the world as a material product. And the archetypal astrological perspective renders the material world sacred. The planets, the phenomena that we experience are archetypal manifestations. They're manifestations of the archetypal realm. And properly understood, the astrological perspective allows everyone to recognize the enchanted nature of their embeddedness through their birth charts and their transits. And particularly, transit practice itself, following one's transits over time, can actually create, or you can cultivate, an actual relationship with the archetypes. Every individual archetype you actually have a unique relationship to, and they are speaking to us in symbols and signs and the synchronicities that we have in our lives that are reflective of the way we are participating. So that's already happening. That's why transits work, like why you can look back at people's transits and see the manifestations that were taking place at those times. It's because of their actual personal relationship with the archetypes. And the transits, the events, the transits are the karmic reflection of one's participation. And properly seen, or, you know, seen in a certain way, that is a deeply enchanted phenomenon. We are deeply connected to a meaningful cosmos that is centered around us. Like the universe is speaking to every individual all the time with the synchronicities and events in your life that are correlative to the transits. And moving into that relationship can actually cultivate an authentic relationship with the divine, in the sense that people desired to have that experience after seeing Avatar. It has that level of capacity to restructure our orientation towards a numinous one, towards a numinous orientation, numinous understanding of ourselves and the world. And I think that's what I was trying to say, riffing off of Deva earlier, is just that, or even like the movie's called Changing of the Gods. And it's a riff off of Jung's statement that Kairos, that the Kairos moment is the moment when the changing of the gods takes place. But it's not just the changing of the gods, like the changing of the worldview. That is clearly the biggest part. But we have to change as well. It's not just about adopting the perspective to our materialistic consumption identities. I believe that we need to transform our perception of who we are as materialistic thinking apes or whatever, you know, smart primates, into genuine spiritual beings. Like that's what the astrological perspective renders, is that we are divinely inspired or infused. I mean, the archetypes, this is why it works, is the archetypes are within us and in the cosmos. They're not actually separate. It's why we identify and recognize them, why we can see them. And that's just it, moving into that relationship, that understanding of the numinous both within and without can transform the nature of our relationship and the nature of our understanding of who we are and what the world is. And I'm thinking big here, I guess, but like, I think that's kind of what's necessary, because it is like you said earlier, Rose, with like time, the time is evaporating in the sense of the biosphere is collapsing. You know, global warming is happening. Our extinction is not too far down the line if we don't change. Like, we have to transform who we are fundamentally in order to survive. And I think the astrological perspective can help us do that, because it renders us as spiritual beings connected to the whole in relationship to the divine, not mechanistic, isolated individual subjects that are separate in some physical way from each other and from the cosmos. That's not actually the case. We're actually in a continuum, a field of energy, and it's all relational. There's no place where you can take part of the universe out and measure it separate. It doesn't happen. It's all measured in relationship to us. So there isn't, like, I'm sorry, I'm just kind of tangenting, running on here, but I am hopeful that a lot of the divisiveness and the division that we see in the world, and that we're projecting ultimately from our sense of separateness, can be transformed. Maybe not this year, but in the coming years. So.
You know, Jeffrey talks about several ways that evolution occurs, and one of the ways that occurs is by making connection, right? You know, and I think about that in terms of that Taurus Scorpio nodal axis. And it's about attunement. You know, what are you choosing to tune into? It is it is that attunement. And it's about your choice makings of what you're going to tune into. You know, what do you have a choice as to where you might find resonance or find that attraction. And to stay, again, with the Scorpio piece, total commitment to that, you know, to stay with that. And that begins the shift that changes the magnetic vibration, that changes the attraction, and that changes the consciousness and so on, right? You know, and I always say that, you know, in order to be effective here, you know, it's like in terms of that creative process, and instead of looking outside of self and wondering what's going on over there and what's going on over there, if you're right here and you're really juiced up about it, you become really attractive. You know, it's like, God, I wonder what that person is doing, because they're so involved in it, right? You know, and that's the way to kind of change the world, you know, like, you know, to stay totally committed and to do something, you know, with your life, yourself, you know, with your resources that is meaningful and purposeful, and that will attract and that will shift, and it begins the shift. It's going to take a long time. What is that, like the 1,000 monkeys or whatever it is, right? You know, right. Bit by bit we go, right? Any closing thoughts, Ryan, as we end today?
Closing thoughts. A brief synopsis on the year ahead. How about I just say this one quick thing that by the Bible verse, or where did I read it, is something like, by our words we will be justified and our words we will be condemned. I think it's our actions this year.
Choose wisely. Bradley, you have finished, Tone? Finish.
One little thing to add, listening to Chad talk there, I was just thinking, gosh, what you're talking about is really represented by the North Node in Taurus conjunct Uranus and Taurus this year. And a lot of people are going to really have a shift or change in their relationship with themselves this year, whether that's through just our own internal process or through crisis. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I do think even our relationship to ownership and resources, that's going to change. Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
That's the nature of Venus and Capricorn, Venus retrograde, and Venus, Mars, and Pluto all together, right? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's going to happen one way or another. I'd like to thank everyone for participating today. Great sharing. It was just a very, very great pleasure. And again, another thanks out to Sue and Robin for hosting today.
Thank you. Thank you all for your valuable and wonderful insights.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Rose.
Thanks,
Best
everybody.
wishes.
Good to see y'all.
Best wishes for the year ahead. Courage.
Yeah,
and
faith.
And faith. Courage, faith, and initiative. Okay.